The psychology of collapse, why 90% of people fall into a cycle of failure. There's a painful truth nobody wants to admit out loud. Most people don't fail because life is hard. Most people fail because their mind collapses long before their life does. And once the mind collapses, everything else follows. Habits, discipline, confidence, relationships, money, future. One crack inside becomes an avalanche outside. Today, we're talking about the psychology of collapse. Why 90% of people fall into the same predictable cycle of failure. Again and again. Even when they try hard. Even when they want better. Even when they swear they'll change. Because collapse isn't an event. Collapse is a pattern. Let's break it down. The first stage of collapse is emotional overload. Most people live with a brain that's constantly drowning in pressure. Unpaid bills. Unspoken fears. Unresolved trauma. Constant comparison. Hidden insecurity. Fear of judgment. Fear of not being enough. Their mind is full, but their life is empty. Their heart is heavy, but their days look normal. And the world doesn't see it. But they feel it every morning. When pressure builds with no release, collapse becomes inevitable. The second stage of collapse is losing clarity. When the mind gets overwhelmed, people stop seeing life clearly. Everything becomes blurry. Everything becomes urgent. Everything becomes stressful. They stop planning and start reacting. They stop choosing and start escaping. They stop thinking long-term and start surviving day to day. A person without clarity becomes a person without direction. And a person without direction collapses into chaos. The third stage of collapse is emotional decision-making. This is where most people destroy their future. They make choices based on feelings instead of facts. I'm stressed, let me distract myself. I'm scared, let me avoid this. I'm tired, let me quit. I'm sad, let me overspend. Emotion becomes the driver. Logic becomes the passenger. Discipline disappears. And collapse becomes a lifestyle. The fourth stage is self-betrayal. This is where a person repeatedly breaks promises to themselves. I'll start tomorrow. I'll fix it next week. I'll change later. I know I shouldn't, but I will anyway. Every time they break a promise to themselves, their confidence dies a little more. Their identity weakens. Their self-respect disappears. A collapsing mind always collapses inward first. The fifth stage of collapse is numbness. This is the scariest part. It's not sadness. It's not fear. It's not anger. It's emptiness. Numbness is when a person stops caring. Stops trying. Stops believing. They detach from life because caring became too painful. This is why 90% of people stay stuck for years. Not because they can't escape, but because they're too numb to move. The sixth stage of collapse is self-sabotage. People begin destroying the very things they need. They quit opportunities. Push away good people. Return to bad habits. Avoid responsibility. Choose temporary comfort over long-term growth. They think they are failing. But really, they're protecting themselves from disappointment. Self-sabotage is emotional armor. It protects you from trying, so you can avoid failing. And here's the final stage. Collapse becomes identity. This is when someone says, "That's just who I am. I've always been like this. I'm not meant for more. This is my life." Once collapse becomes identity, failure becomes home. Comfortable. Predictable. Safe. Tragic, but safe. So how do you break the cycle? How do you escape the psychological trap that 90% of people never climb out of? It starts with one thing. Interrupt the pattern. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need strong motivation. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to stop the collapse long enough to breathe again. Here's how. You break emotional overload by creating silence. Because silence resets the nervous system. You break confusion by asking, "What do I want 1 month from now?" You break emotional decisions by delaying every reaction by 10 seconds. You break self-betrayal by keeping one small promise a day. You break numbness by doing one thing that makes you feel alive, even if it's small. You break self-sabotage by choosing discomfort on purpose. And you break identity collapse by refusing to repeat the same story. Your mind collapses only when you let emotions lead it. But your mind rebuilds the moment you choose clarity over chaos. Stay with me, because the next 5 truths I'm about to give you are the exact shortcuts that stop mental collapse instantly. Each one is sharp, practical, and psychological gold. Here they are. 1. Collapse begins when silence disappears. Protect your quiet, it protects your mind. 2. Your brain fears confusion more than failure. Get clear, and your life will follow. 3. If emotions choose your actions, chaos will choose your future. 4. Self-respect is built by keeping tiny promises. 1 per day is enough to rebuild your identity. 5. You don't escape collapse by doing more. You escape collapse by choosing differently.